Hello, I'm Dustin Brown, and today I am talking about goal setting and how to prioritize your goals. So, we found it most productive to break your goals into needs, wants, and wishes. And this can be a bit existential because it's easy to get lost in the weeds. So to define needs, wants, and wishes, I find it easiest to use an XY grid. So we need to determine what is urgent and what is important for you. Because what's important for you may not be important for your spouse, and vice versa. This is a common theme. Having a pristinely clean house and a well-organized room, not at all important for me. Very important for my spouse. So when it comes to financial planning, it's important to understand what's important to you and to those that are financially dependent or at least commingled with you. So that's what we have for important. So certain things that are important would be like paying your rent. It is urgent, or your mortgage. It is urgent generally once a month. Even if you don't have a mortgage and your house is paid off, you still have to pay your property tax. So that is very important, and in most states it becomes urgent twice a year. So that is a good example of a need. So things that are urgent and important are needs. You need to pay your bills. You need to service the things you've already committed to financially. So, yeah. Now, things that are important, but not necessarily urgent, these are wants. And wants are things you're willing to work for. They're important for you, but you don't have to do them right now. Now, you will have to do them eventually. Wants do become needs because they are important. So best example is you may want a new car, but if your current car is functional, you don't need one. If you need a car to get to work, that's a need. If you need a car, you can't reliably Uber to work all the time. And as my wife told me, I have small children. I can't Uber everywhere. I have to get a car and put car seats in it, which, yeah, makes sense. I need a functional car with car seats, even though it's more cost effective to Uber everywhere. Lost that one. So that's a big determination. So wants, you actually need to retire someday. You need to be able to retire because you may not be able to work until the day you die. So retirement planning is a future need. So you want to save for it. If you wait until that point where you can't work, or maybe your skills have just become outdated and uneconomically fulfilling, that could be terrible. You might be greeting people at the front of a store in a wheelchair, and that is probably not your financial goal. So important, not urgent, is a want. Things you're willing to work for. I like to think wants are wishes. Needs are chores. You have to do them. You have to clean up after yourself. You have to do the dishes. If you don't do the dishes, bad things happen. And wishes. Wishes are often urgent. Your phone will beep you on all kinds of stuff that's happening all the time. If you didn't turn off your notifications, this can disturb your day. This can distract you from things that you need to get done. How many times do you know people that chase their what's urgent and distracting, and they don't do their chores or they don't do their work to their great detriment? So when it comes to financial planning, this is precisely what you have to do for yourself, and only you can answer this in yourself. And you have to be very honest with yourself on what is important and what is urgent. And if you find that everything is urgent and important, you're either in a desperate position or you're having trouble with that existential question in it, or with honesty with yourself. And that is, well, I can't help that. So, good example, functional car. Need a functional car in our society. Doesn't maybe want a nice car. And if you're willing to work extra or shift your budget for that, great. Or you buy that nicer car that you want, and then you have to pay interest on it, and you have to pay that loan off over years. And that's a want if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, it's a wish. Wishes are things that would be nice if you could give them, but they're not practical. So, need a functional car, can be a stripped down model. Want some luxuries, possibly want a self-driving electric car that also flies. Well, that's a wish. If it's a nicer car than you can afford comfortably and still meet all of your other financial burdens, that's also a wish. And that car that maybe you can't afford but someone else can easily afford, it could be a want for them. It could be a wish for you. There are jobs that require fancy cars. I've known sales guys that have to take clients around, and if they have a car that is not representative of their station, that can essentially affect their job and possibly even their employment. So when I started in this industry almost 20 years ago, I was driving a beat up old Saturn. And I had quite a few of my early clients tell me, you need to replace that car because that car does not give me confidence in your ability to make financial decisions. Now that car was cheap, serviced all my needs. It was more than I needed. But yeah, it didn't work great when I was managing millionaires' money. Even though our society has so many millionaires next door, I needed to get a little more. I needed to get 4 doors instead of 2, and I needed something that I didn't have to park around the corner before I went into my meetings. And so that what I thought was a want, a nicer car, was actually a need because of my career. So another good example. Oftentimes I have clients and prospective clients who want to fund their children's college before they fund their own eventual retirement. Quite often I'll have people come in, we want to start a college fund. Okay, great. What are you doing for your own retirement? Think of the airplane. You got to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on the kids. So retirement, the big R, that's a need. You have to be able to retire before you are likely to be unable to continue your career. And that win, that urgency, that's determined on what career you have. There are actual government rules on retirement ages by profession. So my profession has 62 expected retirement age. That's literally in the math of the pension I have for myself and employees. It would be hard for me to set our pension retirement date before 62, because this is a job you can do into your 60s. If you're a professional athlete, that pensioned retirement age can be much, much lower. So I won't get too far into that, but now let's think of the college fund. So your kid, your child, could take loans. You cannot take a retirement loan. So that's why retirement becomes a need and the college planning becomes a want. Even if you have a child in school and they can take student loans, get through school. If for some reason they can't take student loans, there's deeper reasons maybe they shouldn't be in school. If they lose their student loans because their grades are so bad, you throwing money at it's not going to help. So it's unlikely to help anyway. So college is a want. And this particular case, and often, people want to save for that, but they need to save for their own retirement first. Now, the nice thing is some of that retirement money, if you get to a surplus, you could use it for college money. The nice thing about saving is if you save enough, by the time that need becomes urgent, you might have some leftover, you might have some surplus. And the nice thing about the surplus is, let's cover your needs, let's get to those wants, and then, you know, suddenly there's money left over for that wish list item. And that wish list item can be international travel, it can be that fancy car, it can be a second home. These are things that aren't needs, and these are things that you're not necessarily willing to work extra for. You're not willing to take that second job for it, or you're not willing to work an extra 5 years. I recently did a calculation on someone's morning Starbucks and going out to eat almost every night, and it was it was about an extra 8 years of working. So if they had trimmed those expenses to having a coffee at home, or, you know, learning how to cook, it shaved, depending on how much they trim that budget, you know, 5 to 10 years off their work expectation. So if they only go out half as much as if they go out at none, it was like 5 years. If you keep going out every night, you got to work an extra 10 years. So when I did that math, they're like, oh, we wish we could afford to go out every night. And they feel like they can afford to go out every night because they have the money, but they're not funding that future need because it doesn't feel urgent, even though at some point they're going to be older. And you know, you don't want to show up in a financial advisor or financial planner's office in your late 60s trying to figure out how you're going to pay your bills with no time and no resources. It's not good. So that's why it's important to understand this. And the urgency is a factor, but there's also a bigger, you know, that's to a certain extent, that is a time factor, but there's this bigger factor. So now I'm adding a Z, X, Y, Z. And this is sort of your stage in life. You know, so when your kids are in college, when you're funding for kids' college, that might be a wish. You know, I've got small children. I wish I could pre-fund their college so that by the time they're 5, I've already funded the need, which you can do. And if you come into a windfall, maybe you should, if that prioritizes everything else. So, because then that becomes a want. The more assets you have, the more income you're able to save, the more goals you can fund, and that can actually shift where they land. And remember, wants become needs if you ignore them. You know, you may want to upgrade your house. You may want to do a remodel. Well, if you don't paint your house and you don't maintain your house, those wants will at some point in the future become a need as your house falls down around you. So, time stages, and we define stages of life into 4. We usually have working, and that can even be subcategorized into like, where are you in your career? But working, preparing to retire, and preparing to finish retirement, which we call successful. That means that's your in-life planning. That is another stage, and it's an important stage. So that's a factor of time. And the reason you do annual reviews is because this is organic, this moves. Not only does it move for you, it might move for your spouse if you're married. It might move for your kids as their needs determine. So that's more into the needs, wants, and wishes. And when you think of wants and wishes as needs, we call that a weed. That's when you get lost in the weeds. When essentially the emotional side of your brain tricks you into making a logical mistake that can cause a cascade of problems. Sounds simple, not easy. So, you know, think of the marketing industry. That whole industry is, you know, determined to convince you that wish list item should be a need. You know, watch advertisement. You'll quickly feel like you suddenly need this odd trend thing that's popping out, or you need to drive a Jeep over a mountain, Like that's what marketing is. Good marketing blurs these lines. So you need to rationally figure out where these lines are for you and, stick to them.